Hello, world. Welcome back to the Ignited Fortitude podcast with Bobby, Steve. Will is joining us, and Chaplain Lynn from Fort Huachuca. He is the family life chaplain on Fort Huachuca. He has been working on a program that we're pretty excited that he's shared with us, and we hope that you guys are able to get a glimpse into what is coming, because this is going to be a podcast that's kind of an overview of this program, but we plan on going in depth in some future podcasts. So it has been a crazy week, though.
It is.
So
Easter week, dude.
Yeah, it's Easter week. So this is the Saturday before Easter. You know, this is going to drop on Wednesday after Easter, but wow.
Well, but, bringing this up, what a good timing.
Yeah.
Look at the scope of what we're about to talk about. It's going to be right on point on continuing the rebirth for all of us.
For sure, dude.
Amen. Excited.
So without further ado, I guess.
Yeah, Chaplain Lynn.
Well, it's absolutely privileged to be here. So excited. As you said, Steve, I'm family life chaplain at Fort Huachuca. And so I've been given permission, in a sense, to come and participate in this podcast as an outreach from the fort and from the post, coordinated through our public affairs office. So excited about that. And this is definitely an Army program that has gone in a lot of ways Army-wide and has been moving out through our installation through various units that have had the opportunity to participate in this. And so this Tuesday, I'll be able to brief through our suicide awareness prevention manager, Joanna Prince, to get on a Teams meeting and talk to all of the suicide prevention managers throughout the Army about this program. So this is an incredible program that gets after prevention and the challenge that we've been facing in the United States Army, which is a microcosm of the greater macrocosm of our American culture, where suicidality is at astronomical proportions. And I think I could rightly say, along with sociologists and psychologists, that we are in a crisis of meaninglessness. And people have lost their sense of meaning in life, that the architecture and the structures and the foundations of historical knowledge that provides a civilization with what it means to be human and to have purpose in life, and how that is fleshed out through relationships and what I would call belonging in life, that gives us this superstructure of our meaning in life. And when we have a robust meaning in life, we are going to be incredibly fulfilled, and our well-being is going to be flourishing. So that's kind of the start of it. I'll start running with it.
Yeah.
If I get too excited.
What's the name of the program?
Yeah, so great. So the name of the program is called Pathfinder, and ultimately, this is so applicable to every individual. In our culture, we like to say many people, probably it is statistically 1/3 of our culture today is defined by the sociologist as the nones, N-O-N-E-S, that there is no religion being practiced. Mm-hmm. And that has not ever been a statistic that we've experienced in our country before. And this has incredible implications. So this is a program that gets at creating a new architecture of spirituality based on really important categories that I've synthesized together and have made applicable through various processes. So what does this mean? So Pathfinder, this program can help everybody find a path for meaning in life. And underneath meaning in life are the two pillars of purpose in life and belonging in life. But for us as Ignited Fortitude folks and everybody else who's around listening to this podcast, the most important thing that is the feeder to purpose in life and belonging in life is our moral compass, is our spiritual values. And there's no doubt we know who we are, and that fills into a positive self-identity, which is another aspect of this program. So meaning in life is the overall structure, followed by 2 pillars of purpose and belonging in life. And then we have these things that feed that as well, which I would call, sacred routines, which are our habits, disciplines, rituals, traditions. And the Latin word religio means to bind. So these things, when we focus our habits, rituals, disciplines, traditions on our purpose in life and our belonging in life, it's going to be binding it together in a much greater sense of strength. But these are also informed by our spiritual compass, right? So Pathfinder, what might be your path to find as you develop yourself, as you look at these things through particular processes? We won't get into the processes today. I think we'll talk a little bit about the theory, but this is all evidence-based. So you can Google, meaning in life, belonging in life, purpose in life, spiritual values, positive self-identity or identity in individuals who you could take different kinds of assessments about to figure out where you're at in this on a particular scale. And those who have these things in life, but especially for us as we think about spiritual values, statistically, and the evidence bears out, this is a science, especially from one particular researcher that has come online in a really strong way. Her name is Dr. Lisa Miller out of Columbia University. And people who've got a strong moral compass in life and are practicing their religion, they have an 80% protective factor against suicidality, 70% protective factors against high-risk behaviors. So doing things in the arena of sexual ethics or drugs and alcohol or things that just could put people at risk, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing is another 50 to 70% somewhere in there protective factor against anxiety and depression. Now, is that not an answer for our present culture of meaninglessness today, right? Sure. And so Pathfinder, how to find your path. If I could just put my finger on one particular verse that I think that really brings this out for me and probably us as I think about a path and the Pathfinder. So Psalm 23, verses 3 and 4. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I asked this question to the folks that I do training with. I want you and even the listeners here today to just take a pause and reflect on this. And this is the question, so diagnostic, that gets at the sense of meaninglessness, what it could mean if we are in a place in our life where we've hit that or potentially go there. So this is a question. If you were stuck on a desert island and you had enough food to last you for the rest of your life, but you knew you were never going to get off, who are you? Who are you?
It's difficult to even think about, right? Like, it's difficult to try and imagine because so many of us define ourselves by work, by the things that we do in everyday life, as opposed to not having to do anything other than exist. Who are you, right? Like,
And that's a good question or good statement, because even thinking of that, most people that are on an island, right? Their purpose is, I got to get off this island so that I can go. But what you're asking is, you're going to be stuck on this island for the rest of your life. Who are you? What are you going to do then?
Yeah, and don't you feel that sense of who am I, because everything is involved in my what I do and who I'm connected with. So I asked this question in my training about a week ago, and some non-commissioned officers, one turned to the other and said, I'd kill myself, right? And the other said, I was thinking the same thing. And
That's crazy.
yeah,
That's crazy.
So really, this question gets at that sense. It brings us there without even having to get there. So we need meaning in life like we need oxygen. Mm-hmm. And without those things, we're not going to be able to breathe. And we may not want to live. I really think we move into the realm of suicidal ideations, like it caused those soldiers right there to have suicidal ideations. So I think we get this idea, right? The most important thing is how we define ourselves in our relationship to a higher power, to a transcendent God, to have a personal relationship with God. And I know for us, as we head into Easter weekend tomorrow, we are over there, that defines us more than anything. So asking that question in another training setting, dead silence, no pun intended. And the most senior leader, who was a chaplain in that particular place, he said, I'm not alone. God is with me. Mm. And to know that in our darkest hour, regardless of what our circumstances might be, that gives us the power to be resilient. Knowing that and knowing who that is, who we are, and a connection.
Yeah, because there is like this proverbial desert that people feel like they're in, right? Something changes, right? Their career changes, or they get out of the military, in that sense. Somebody falls morally.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Addiction.
Yeah. You know what I mean? They go back to it and they feel like they are on an island that they're never going to get off of, right? Especially, and I think especially when there's some kind of when you mess up, when you do something wrong, you know what I mean? I think people feel like, I'm never going to get over this. I'm never going to things are never going to be made right.
Not going to recover.
Not going to recover.
I'm not going to recover. Perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think it's important to note that so many of those times we do it to ourselves, right? It's thoughts and what we may be going way off a different line here, but
this is really important. This is huge.
What we're called to do, right, as believers, is come alongside those people, right? We shouldn't treat them as outcasts. Hey, it's not on me to make sure that you pay the consequence for your actions. It's on me to help lift you up and come alongside you and help guide you in the direction you should be going as a believer, right? Mm-hmm. In the worldly sense, it's like, hey, you did it, you did the time, or you did the crime, you do the time, right? Like, hey, I'm not associated with you. And I think it's real easy for us sometimes to just step away from people and be like, hey.
Well, it's that shame.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even like we talked about, Steve and I had a conversation with a soldier the other day, is holding them accountable, right? Not outcasting them because of their decisions, and them actually searching for their meaning of life currently, and holding them accountable. And he literally said, this is the first time I have been held accountable in what I'm doing in my life. So here we are, exactly like I said, the umbrella wise is what is the meaning of life? What am I doing? Who am I with? And like that chaplain said, I'm not alone. And that's the key purpose of Ignited Fortitude, is letting everyone know that you are not alone.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I want to piggyback on Will. So this is an Armor of God coin, and I brought this today on purpose, right? You're not alone, right? So get a little
Mine's in my
transparent.
office.
Yeah.
I got mine in my pocket too.
Awesome, man. Check it out.
I owe everybody drinks.
Oh, you got us water.
He did.
Armor of God right here.
Yeah.
I did.
Awesome.
Oh, look at that.
Man, so Will was coming to my office one day, and we were going to have a little chat. And I thought I was going to be helping him out, right?
You did.
Yeah. Yeah. I helped him out because he helped me out. And, this was like, I was raw. I was really, really raw. We're pulling out of Afghanistan, and a lot of emotions were going on there. And I'm feeling it now too. And this Armor of God coin, I gave out 500 of these to my soldiers, actually, in this unit, 2505, when I was in Iraq. And when you're constantly giving out and your well is dry, and you have somebody come alongside of you like Will did for me on that day, it meant more to me than a general officer giving me his coin. And where I keep this is the coin above all coins. It is top shelf, because this means more to me than any kind of achievement or anything else. This belonging in life, this connection with others and people of faith, that runs deeper than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that is, you know what? Will's really good about this too, because Will does this to everybody. He doesn't want to be recognized right now, but
That's true.
But Will has been an example for me in the aspect of, hey, when I had kind of fallen away a little bit after being saved, and I mean, we talked about how I helped Will in his time of need, which I wasn't even aware that I was really doing at the time. But he went and was like, "Oh yeah, school of ministry, I'm going to sign up," and he signed up. And he didn't say, "Hey Steve, when you come?" But I was like, "Man, like, why? I'm going to go back and do it too," you know? And then he, all the time. So one of the things we talked about this week in Bible study is in Philippians, where Paul prays for the Philippians all the time, right? Like all the time. I mean, he's clear about that in his message. And he says like with love, right? And we were kind of challenged by Benny, who's been on the podcast, to say, hey, like, are you praying for the people you love? Are you reaching out to them? Are you telling them? Because that's what Paul's doing. Are you telling them, hey, I'm praying for you. I love you. And I will tell you this, Will is somebody who is an example of like, hey, I love you. Like, doesn't even, like, out of nowhere, just, I love you. Like, cool. Like, I needed that right now. And he does it to people he barely knows. And it's an example for us for me, as I see him, like, I mean, we've been doing all these events on post, and I'm getting upset, and I'm getting angry, and I'm like, man, why won't they just listen, and like just out of nowhere, we'll see somebody that was like asking if anybody needed water. And he's like, hey, I love you, thank you, like thank you for what you're doing, and I'm like, all right, Will, like, thanks for like pouring salt in the wound right now, but you're right. I got to look at things differently, right?
Salt and salt and light? Salt and light. And that gives the purpose in life, right? And that's just because the Lord has blessed me to have the ability to engage, right? Regardless of the situation. So I'm very blessed in that and outgoing, even though I truly liked to be alone, but it gives us that belonging. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely correct. That one NCO asked whether or not we need water, and literally no one said anything to her. So you just felt her kind of felt dejected. Yeah. It's like I had a purpose here to get anyone water, and everyone ignored me. And so that's what Steve was talking about, is just fully engaged and take those opportunities. And I got beat up the last time when we went to the prophecy conference, and I didn't fully engage with that waitress that day, and I had to go search back for her, and she was off. So it was the Lord speaking to me, even though it was in Bobby. Yeah, correct. And I heard Bobby's voice, even though it was probably the Lord saying, "We'll go back, go back, go back." But I heard Bobby's voice, and it's important. I get joy and pleasure from engaging folks like that, because it gives me that opportunity to speak, even if it's a sprinkle, as my deacon used to say back in the day, was, sprinkle a little bit of Jesus on folks from time to time and see where it leads us.
Real quick, with your Pathfinder, two things that, why did you, so this is a program that you came up with. It's not a program that's in the Army, correct?
Correct.
So that's my first question.
Yeah.
My second question is going to be, what have you seen? So how long have you been in the chaplaincy?
16 years as a United States Army chaplain. And
so have you seen a difference between when you first started off in the chaplaincy to 16 years later?
In regard to suicidal ideation and completions, yes. So 2011, we had the highest rates of suicides in the Army, and that is greater than what was taking place after the Vietnam era. We're just coming out of Iraq at the time, and very difficult period for our force. Then we had 2019. And we had 2020, and we had 2021, and 19, 20, and 21 surpassed 2011.
Dang.
Yeah.
Each year?
19 beat 11, 20 beat 19, 21 is right there. Yeah, 21 is higher than 19, but just a little bit lower than 21 or 20. Yeah. So this is the crisis of meaninglessness, and it really comes from this erosion of purpose or belonging. Mistakes are made. Sometimes we see this in the military, but it doesn't have to be in the military. There's, and when I say mistakes, there's, in a sense, moral violations of codes or ethics, morals of the law of God, and this has huge implications if this takes place within the workforce, on the job, or in the home. And if somebody does something on the job where their job is in jeopardy, then that, quite honestly, could mean their family is in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. Right? So that is like collapsing these two pillars that are holding up the roof of the meaning in life. And the question I ask folks in the training, how can you diversify, develop, and deepen your purpose in life and your belonging in life? Because if your purpose in life is thin, and that's all you have, is that one little thing that you see yourself doing, and you might think that's what you're good at, but you're not kind of growing yourself. And as disciples, which means to be a learner, we ought to be in this mindset of I need to grow and I need to develop. So how can I develop, deepen, and diversify myself? So it's kind of like if I was to only put all of my stocks in the stock market on, let's just say, what's the Bitcoin, right? That's pretty high risk, right? I wouldn't want to do that. But if I did it with Coke, I did it with Procter & Gamble, I did it with Tesla, we know things that are going to go the long haul. So that's what I mean. Deepen, diversify, and develop. And relationships, this is a big deal. This is a huge deal. So if I can remember I had a soldier come in, and he was on a second marriage. Second marriage is failing. And I asked him, so do you have any friends that you could rely on? 0 friends. No friends. And completely isolated. And I have a slide in my slide deck when I can pull it up or anything like that, but it allows a person to get a picture of themselves to see that when we are so thin and that pillar is about to collapse, you're going to lose all your oxygen. It's going to take the wind out of your lungs, and all kinds of thinking goes in the wrong direction. So we need friends. We need colleagues. We need people we could trust. We need to ultimately be vulnerable with each other. And that word vulnerability is huge. It's not just for to talk about in marriage and family therapy or psychological circles or something like that. We need this in the church. We need this on the job. And what does that mean? It means I got your back and you got my back. I know that if I need somebody in the program, so the Belonging Life, the particular process that is huge, is so important. And this is a challenge for our culture today, that we are highly isolated people. I think the pandemic exacerbated that, right? But we're already going in that direction. And I think gaining traction to expand relationships is even more difficult to do. We're all online. We're online now, right? But so I have people identify who are your top 5 potential friends that you can covenant with. You could say, you pick up the phone, go to them in person. I will have your back. I will have your best interest in mind. You have my best interest in mind. You're a person I believe that I could trust and be vulnerable to. And in that midnight hour when I'm on the struggle bus, I can count on you and you can count on me. And so when the wind is taken out of my lungs because of something that happens, maybe that I do, or maybe it's something that I'm not, that happens to me. Sure. Like, there's 3 things that I cover in the program. I call it the absurdity of life. Stuff that just happens that you had no control of. We're blindsided by this. I'm going to say the C word, cancer, right? We have no control over that. A car accident, a pandemic, So what do you do with that? And that stuff could level us if, especially where we don't have our identity centered in God and our spiritual values. If it is only on those 2 pillars, and there isn't a spiritual foundation where there's connections that are vibrant and live and rich, we're going to be susceptible to weakness. So I don't know if that makes sense at all.
No, it
What
does.
are you thinking about?
Go ahead.
So this was one of my favorite parts of when I was looking at your program. When we sat down and talked about it, that covenant relationship, that you should have 5 people, 5 friends. I think it's especially difficult for men, right? Because we're talking about being vulnerable, right? We're talking about having that conversation, that awkward conversation about pornography, right? Like having, being honest with people in your life of the struggles that you're going through, where you fall short, where you're weak, and hoping that other person is going to hold you accountable in that situation. And, there was, when I had TikTok, there was like this TikTok trend going around that asking men, like, who do you turn to? And it was like hundreds of thousands, if not probably in the millions of men that just posted little videos like, I don't do that. Like, we're not allowed to do that. We're allowed to have people to turn to. We're allowed to have help, So for men, I think it's especially important to recognize the importance of these relationships, that you're vulnerable, that you're going to be held accountable, but that you're also that same thing for that person, right? And if you can't be that, if you can't do that, you're honest and you tell them, like, hey, I don't think I can help you in this situation. And
that's really
and remove yourself, so that way you're not trying to be something you're not and lead somebody astray, right? Lead somebody down the wrong path. And
I think because that's sometimes where people won't be vulnerable, right? Like if I come to you and I tell you something, and over a course of time, like I can kind of confide in you, I'm like putting my feelers out, and then you don't give me anything back, like you don't reciprocate that, you're not safe.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we do this in the military, right? Like we jab at each other all the time. Like if somebody can take the jabs that we're like giving each other, and you know what I mean? That's how we know, like, hey, I know I can trust you because you're willing to take my sarcasm and criticism, and you know what I mean? But those people that can't take that, they're like a weak link, and you can't trust them. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to be stuck in a foxhole with them. You know what I'm saying? And I think, like, I know Pastor Ryan that came on the podcast, him and I had a conversation after Robbie Zacharias fell, and just trying to like understand, like, dude, how does a Christian leader fall in such a manner? You know, and him and I were talking about it. I'm like, dude, straight up, like he had a bunch of yes men around him. And I said, dude, and him and I, like at this time we had like, and I told him, like, look, dude, you know me, and him and I have always been really tight. Our wives are real tight. And I said, you have full permission in my life to check me, to tell me, like, hey, dude, you need to be careful with this or whatever. I said, and if I'm not listening, dude, you have full permission to go to my wife and tell her. You know what I'm saying? Right. To tell her, tell your wife, to tell my wife. You know what I mean? Like, dude, and I'm giving you right now permission to do that. If I'm not listening and you're trying to tell me, like, hey, bro, like, stop that, or you know what I mean? Because when we started the podcast, and even when we were doing the one on men to man up, there was a statistics where it was like, you know, like 75% of men, if they had somebody in their life, wouldn't commit adultery or wouldn't commit suicide or wouldn't walk out on their family. You know what I mean? And it's like, just because of having somebody in their life, you know, and being able to hear, like, you know, if I'm always talking bad about, you know, somebody, or if I'm always talking positive about another female, you guys, and you know what I mean? I've had the conversation with Ryan, but you guys are in my life too. You know what I mean? So you guys, the same thing, like, dude, why are you always talking about, you know, so-and-so, like, you need to stop, you know what I'm saying? And you need to have that in the sense where it's like, dude, keep me from going in the wrong direction to see it. Because once you get entangled in that, now it's just you're just trying to cover your tracks constantly.
I'm thinking back to the conversation we had this week with the soldier that, it's one of the soldiers. I've talked about him before. We've been discipling him for about a year now, you know, and he's read the whole Bible. He's the one that talked to us about Saint Dismas. He had a situation in his life where he's facing some hard times with possible Article 15 and all these things that are happening. And when he came to Will and I and asked for a character reference letter, right? And we initially, I was like, sure, you know, like, but like, send me your packet. Like, what happened? Like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, well, you know, the captain blew it out of proportion. It's not that big of a deal, blah, blah, blah. Well, when I read what was there, I was like, well, this isn't really being blown out of proportion. And in your statement, you admit that you did this. So, hey, and it looked like there was some patterns in his life. So me and Will, like, we sat down, we talked, I was like, man, we can't write this letter, you know, like we have to hold him accountable. We have to talk to him. And it was a difficult conversation. I'm not going to lie, to bring somebody in, because especially like
a friend.
Well, he's a friend, but not like what we do here. Right. Like, I see you guys all the time. Right. So to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who is a friend, but you don't know real well. And obviously I didn't know what was going on in his personal life during that discipleship time, but it was like, wow, okay, so let's have this conversation. Like, hey, I'm not judging you. I'm just as bad as you look. Like, this is what I've done. Like, but I can't write this letter because, well, you know, I feel like I would be sinning against my conscience. Paul tells us not to do that. Like, you know, there's things that those conversations aren't easy to have. But at the end of it, he sent us a message saying, like, hey, like, I don't think I've ever been held accountable like you guys held me accountable. And like, that's what it comes in.
And think about this, because you're honestly looking at the bigger picture, like, legit. Because you might think, like, well, if I was being really loving, I would have given him the pass. But honestly, no, because you know what? If you wouldn't have been thinking about him. You would have been thinking about yourself, right? Because you don't want to. Because hey, I don't want to let him down. One, right. Two. Guess what? He's going to get away with whatever happens if that's the case. And is he going to learn from it?
Probably not.
You know what I mean? For most, I mean, and so like the most loving thing you can do in that situation is like, look, dude, like, hey, this might sever our relationship. This might sever anything that we have, but I love you too much. Hey, it's the same thing with the Lord, right? Hey, I love you too much to leave you the way that you are. I love you the way that you are, but I love you too much to leave you that way. And like, no.
Yeah, and that's what we did. We told them that. I said, this is from straight love. where we're coming from. And way it looked like, he literally the following day, he stopped by to pick up a package for us. He looked different, you know, in a positive sense. So, you know, going through this and understanding where Pathfinder is taking us and hopefully preventing those end results that we're trying to prevent, from what I'm seeing, is that we gave him a belonging in life, because he had two brothers literally said, okay, scripture tells us if you're not paying attention the first time, we're going to bring two or three. And then we're going to continue this until you get right and say, go find what you need to find and then come back, because we're going to open arms and love you some more.
Yeah, because there's a measure on what you're guiding it off of.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we had that standard, and until in that day, you know, that my devotional talked about, totally spaced it now.
But it talked about it.
Yeah. Correct. You know, but it was, you know, it's just about just not being true, and like, you know, sin of the conscience and false testimony. Wasn't going to do that in writing that character letter, you know. Then I'm providing false testimony on something that is not honest, not God honest, because that's not me.
Yeah.
You know, looking back at Pathfinder, like what you call them in your program is catastrophic life events, right? Like that's where the job, the DUI, you know, the things that are happening that is going to affect both your purpose and belonging in life, right? Or just one. It could affect just one, but generally speaking, like if something's affecting your purpose in life, like you said, your belonging in life, if it's just your family, or even, I mean, you just brought up the fall of somebody, right? Like if his purpose in life, you know, was affected in his fall, there's also going to be that belonging in life that's going to be affected. And these catastrophic life events, whether they're it's the death of a loved one, you know, like you said, like they have such an impact on us that. I mean, I kind of talked about it with when I lost my dad, right? Like we try to find a way to cope. Yeah. And generally, I know for me, I said, I was like, my way of coping was trying to help everybody else, not caring about me. So I was going to that belonging side and saying like, hey, how can I help you? How can I help you? You know, what can I do? Whereas I'm not trying to help myself at all. And I think like those catastrophic life events are the things that are going to, you know, it could be almost anything because it depends on what you put your value in, right? Like we talked about that, like what's your value in? If your value's in, I'm a great video game person, right? Like then your PlayStation blows a fuse or something, you know, like that could be a catastrophic life event, right?
No,
like,
break a finger, break a thumb.
Yeah, like you might not be able to use your fingers anymore. What, like, so like there, it's what are you putting your value in? You know, if it's money and all of a sudden you lose it all, like
yeah. So the cool thing about calling the program Pathfinder, that it is a path for you to find, or multiple paths, because this is something to be updated on a regular basis. We're changing all the time in a developmental sense. So I'm 54. I'm not the same person that I was when I was 44, 34, 24, right? And there's things that there's passages of life that I have gone through with marriage, family, job, moving, and things of that nature. So within the program itself, we trying to have these what I would call meaning-making markers on your path or the multiple paths of life that we are following. Our meaning-making markers are going to be changing throughout the developmental passages of life. So our relationships change. I'm going to retire soon. I'm about to, my family and I are going to be geographically separated until I can catch up with them later on in this year. And so in between my present and my future, and for all of us, there's something that we would call, that social scientists, psychologists call a meaning gap. So the gap between of who I want to be and who I am. And so, and in between that gap, usually there arises stress, tremendous stress sometimes, because there is this uncertainty, and I think that's the buzzword of 2020, 2021, 2022, uncertainty, right? So how do we become certain in life, right? In the midst of the challenges that go on, right? And how do we close the meaning gap? We know that in PCS transitions, it's actually, and this actually comes from my wife's research. She did a doctoral program, and the core of this really came from her research, that in permanent change of stations, PCS transitions, when an Army family moves from one place to another around the world, wherever, we lose all of our meaning-making markers in our life. The relationships on the job, the location where our kids go to school, have relationships with teachers, with community people. The type of work that I do is going to change. So in between now and then, wherever we're going to go, and that's just one particular example, that is a highly stressful event. So Pathfinder is a way to strengthen the meaning-making markers, especially with a person's spiritual core. And the thesis for my wife's doctoral dissertation was that if a person really dials into their religio, those habits, disciplines, rituals, traditions, that becomes the meaning-making marker to help us get over that gap. It's going to be God. God is going to fill that gap. And for us, I talked about the absurdity of life, or suffering in life, or injustice in life. That's just, as a human being, that's going to come no matter what. I think it was in the movie Princess Bride. I think, I forget the main character, but he says to Princess Buttercup, life is pain, right? Life is pain. So how do we gap the pain? How do we overcome the gap of pain? So this is kind of comprehensive as we're looking at belonging in life, more so today than anybody else. But Jesus would say, take up your cross and follow me. If anybody come after me, and following the Lord in our pain, there's a connection, a spiritual connection that somehow helps us be able to gap it, because we know that He's there with us. And I think that's really important. Kind of getting back into meaning-making markers, and what you guys were especially talking about in relationships. Those relationships change in life. Doesn't mean they're not going to be significant, but the ability to connect with certain people because of distances could be really, really challenging. So I'll get theoretical real quick, and this is the science behind relationships. And this is huge to get on the table. There's a guy by the name of Dunbar, Dr. Dunbar. He came up with this idea called the Dunbar Circle, right? So in the middle of the circle, there's concentric circles. You have intimate partner relationships. Then you have 3 to 5 best friends, right? Then you have 12 to 15 people who he calls are your sympathy group. You can lean on them, but they're not your close friends. And then there's the tribe, which is goes up to about 150 people. And tribe is just colloquial for what it is. That's your group. And the thing is, our brains can only handle about 150 relationships. Doesn't matter if you got 1 million Twitter followers, you only could be friends with about 150 people, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. In real life, we can't do it. So who are we going to choose to be those 3 to 5 best friends when our life is changing? And we have to really be intentional in order to be healthy about these kinds of things. And I just kind of want to get that on the table.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that, because for believers, or even people who are like walking that line of I believe, but I'm not really involved, or I might go to church, or so. Like, where are you at? Like, with what tribe do you belong to? Right. So if you're coming to church only on Sundays, you're not doing anything else. We know that's not what saves us, right? Like, but the people you're associating with are the people that are going to determine what's happening in your life, right? If I'm coming to church, let's say I'm doing all the serving things, the doing Bible study, coming to church every time we have a service, all that kind of stuff. But then when I leave here, I go hang out with a bunch of guys at a strip club, and those are my close friends, right? Like, what life am I really living, and what tribe do I really belong to? So, I think identifying that and picking those, like you said, picking the right 3 to 5 friends that are going to hold you accountable, right? Like, if I'm coming here hanging out with you guys today, and then I leave here, go to the strip club with these other guys, you guys might hold me accountable, but you don't know what I'm doing. So I'm out here with these guys. These are the guys I picked as my 3 to 5,
I know what you drive.
Yeah, it has a big old Ignited Fortitude sticker on it, so you won't see it in the strip club.
But it's true, though. You know what I mean? Because there you go. It is that you're belonging, right? Yep. You're belonging to, because even though you might associate with people,
that doesn't necessarily mean that's your tribe.
Yeah,
right?
That's your tribe. So. But, I think it's great that, here we are talking about, you have this program for suicidal prevention. How do we prevent it? And I mean, think about what you're saying. And I mean, it's obviously the church, you know what I mean? In a sense, like what we belong to, what is it? You know what I mean? Where are you going to find your purpose at? Sure. And how are you going to have people that you can relate to? Because even like, let's say you guys are going to PCS, right? You guys are going to leave and it's going to take a while for the kids to get, in a good group of people, with whether it's school or, for, your wife to find a close group of friends, you know what I mean? But when you go to the church, you're like, hey, you know what? We're all on the same level playing field. You know what I mean? Like, we went to Cuba a couple of years ago and did some ministry work in Cuba, and you go there and it's like, it's family. Like, legit. It was like family. It wasn't this awkward, like, oh, I don't know how it is, like heartwarming, and like, we know why you're here. You're here for a purpose. You're here to do something. We share the same purpose. You know what I mean? And so like it literally felt like it was family. You know what I mean? As opposed to going to another place and doing something and then it's weird and awkward.
Well, I think that's also a challenge for the church too, right? Like, are we being that? Like, when people show up here, are we welcoming them and being the people that that they can feel comfortable around and feel welcomed, and like, hey, okay, yeah, Pastor Bobby, he was real nice. He gave me his phone number, and all these types of things that a lot of the times, I know in my personal experience, when I showed up at a church, it was like looking at me like, who's the new guy? Like why is he here? Like, who is that? And then running into those same people outside of the church, and they're not living what they were just doing in the church, right? Like, I agree. Or learning. So, I mean, as much as this is about suicide prevention, and if you're experiencing those catastrophic life events or just life events in general, that, I mean, I think a retirement and moving across the country, I think that could be considered a catastrophic life event. I mean, I know when I went through it, it was pretty difficult, and it led to some crazy things in my life. But not only that, like, hey, if you're listening to this and you have all these things, right? You have the purpose in life, the belonging in life, meaning in life. You should be able to recognize when somebody's going through a catastrophic life event and pull them in, right?
That's so key. That's what this does at an educational level. It will help you for yourself become really aware. This is the category of my life where I potentially need to grow, this one or this one, and how that feeds into how I feel about life, right? So educational for me, educational for other people. You're looking around to the left or to the right. Okay, I can identify. I know that person is going to be on the struggle bus based on the situation. So I'm going to lean forward and reach out to that person. This is really great for that kind of awareness.
Yeah, and that's hard, man, because I know, just recently some people going through some stuff and reaching out, and like, what am I going to say in this situation? How am I going to put it? And, one individual I reached out, I was like, hey, I know you're going through a lot. You want to go to the gym? You know what I mean? Because I know he's a gym body. So it's like, hey, you want to go to the gym? Like, you don't need to talk. You don't need to explain anything. Let's just go throw some weight up. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he gave me like a very like, thanks, buddy. You know what I mean? And he didn't reach out, but it's like, I think that's a part of the problem too, where it's like, and I know before I even reached out, it's like, he's probably not going to even want to do anything. You know what I mean? But you know what? My responsibility is to do what I'm supposed to be doing, because I don't want to drop the ball in the situation. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think, like, even to what you said, Steve, like, there's a difference between going to church and then being the church. Right. And I think that's where we lose it. You know what I mean? And I think there's a difference between, like, wanting to have friends and actually being a friend.
Yeah. So I know that I've dropped the ball in the past, and I wasn't fully aware. This is years ago, but a really good friend reached out to me and was vulnerable and shared some things that he was going through. He was in another state. I was super, super busy, right? No excuse, whatever. But he was in a predicament, and I really didn't fully understand and realize the depth of his predicament that he shared with me, and he ended up leaving his wife. And after the fact, I was like, wow, Paul, get a clue, man. I didn't. So we connected a couple of times. Actually, I had so much respect for this person. I never thought in a million years that this person, this was a long, long time ago, that would do that thing. And I'm a smarter person for that now. And I'll definitely, sometimes I think we need to not take no for an answer, right? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Just nudge a little bit more, or just kind of hang on a little bit more, be patient a little bit more. And that could be the tipping point with some things. I kind of want to open up the aperture a little bit more and kind of come back to this Dunbar Circle stuff and that 150 tribe. As I was thinking about this, one other like key data point that I think is important to get on the table for our listeners and thinking about tribe. So in the research that my wife did, and this comes from universities, and she just pulled it in and said, hey, this is really key for us, for the military, that tribe actually has a greater protective factor than the intimate partner relationship.
What do you mean?
Somehow, within the values of the tribe, if we know, as a microcosm of a larger macrocosm of the 150, so to speak, that's a little arbitrary, but the 150, we'll just say 150 people at a church, for our case, right? That the regular participation within that tribe and within the microcosm of the tribe, that there's a greater protective factor against catastrophic meaning loss than the lone pillar of the intimate partner relationship. An intimate partner relationship is one person. Mm-hmm. And if that intimate partner relationship starts to crack, have weaknesses, crumble because of just the challenges that are going on with marriage and family and things like that, the protective factor of the tribe is there to lean on that. And I think in our culture today, so many people are tribeless. They're just floating out there, and
well, they're around people, but they don't belong to something, right?
Right. They belong to their phones.
Yeah. Oh yeah, their tribe is their social group,
social media groups.
Antisocial group. You know what I mean? In that sense, yeah. And even just think of that, like, because think about it, like, if you're in a situation, like, let's say it was with the spouse and it was having to do with money, right? You guys know each other in a sense of like, look at how much we're hurting, what we're doing with this, like, we should really just, do something, financially, like cheat on our taxes or do something, you know what I mean? Do something that you normally wouldn't do, but because you guys are in that situation, that intimate partner is willing to say, hey, you know what? Okay, yeah, like let's go ahead and do that. But if we were to come to a group of people and I'm like, dude, I think I'm going to have to cheat on my taxes because such and such and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You guys are going to be from a different perspective and say, dude, don't do that. You know what I mean? Don't do that. Here, we'll give you money or let's do, you know, whatever else we can do. Maybe we have you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's different in that situation because you guys are detached. And I think that if anything from the tribe, it's like, it's easier to look at the bigger picture knowing that we stand for something, right? And you're detached because you're not in that situation, like with that person, with their partner in a sense of, hey, we should do this because of...
Yeah, you bring different experiences onto the table to protect the individuals from doing harm to themselves or to their family. Because that diversity, like we talked about in the 150 people, will give different experience in trials that they've been through. May not be the same trials, but how they overcame those because of the folks immediate, that 3 to 5 helped them out. Now that 150 says, okay,
don't give up what you want for what you want right now.
I love that quote. That's awesome.
That moral compass is what it comes back to.
It
right?
does.
Like,
It does. It's the shared values.
Right. So looking at that, like, it's like, well, if it's just me and Will, if like hey, we're gonna put this away for right now and we're going to go this way. But the 4 of us, somebody's going to, I would hope, would be like, no, get that compass back out. Like that's not what we're told to do.
Correct.
Like, hey, let's figure out a different way. And it's easier to get one person to follow than it is to get a group, right? Big time. So I think that, I mean, looking at this program, like just looking at all the different aspects of it, it's meaningful on so many different levels. Yes, it will be have a huge impact on the suicide rate. I would believe. I mean, based off what I'm seeing, like it's gonna help, but it's about just living life in general, right? Like, and that's what it comes down to. It's like how you're going to live your life and what your values in, what your purpose is. And it all comes back to that meaning of life and what is your meaning of life, right? If it's not in the right place,
but you are in a little bit harder of a predicament, right? Like it's easy for us, Ignited Fortitude, you know what I mean? We got a big old cross as a T, you know what I mean? And that was, you know, Steve's like, when we first had the logo, it was just, you know, regular font. And he's like, yeah, but it doesn't, like, looking at this, I don't know what that means. Like, you know what I mean? Like
how is when it was in regular font, when the cross wasn't in Ignited Fortitude, how is this Christian related? How do I know that Ignited Fortitude is for Christ? Right.
So in that sense, like it's easy for us to be on the podcast, talk about Christ, like it's Christ-centered. This is exactly what you get. You're in a little bit harder of a predicament because the army is so vast that you have people that don't believe in God. They don't believe in Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? They have a God, you know what I mean? Or they have spirituality, but they don't believe in Jesus. And you can't, you know, people have to be willing to come in. You can't, I'm assuming, right? In the army, you can't like say, hey, you have to, this is the only way. And even in this, like you got somebody that's on the verge of suicide, like you're trying to find a point where you can connect with them. And if, you know what I mean? Like if you're like, hey, well, you know what? Jesus is the only way. Although we know that's true. Yeah. You know what I mean? It puts them in a little bit of sense because now you're like, you know what I mean? Like you're not paying attention to what I'm like, I'm about to take my life. You know what I mean? So in a sense for you, like, how do you tackle in the sense, like your higher purpose, your higher meaning?
Yeah. So, when I gave this brief in downtown Manhattan in January, February of this year, I was, you know, to be able to say that there is a God is really, really important. Hey, we have it on our money, right? In God we trust. And we can't be afraid to say that. The evidence now says how critical it is for our existence, for our personal well-being. So we can say that there's data out there that helps society, civilization to flourish. The absence of not having it in your life puts you in a detrimental, critical space without it. I'm just saying, you know, this is how it is. So I'm not going to push it. I'd like to provide a couple of examples for those who might be a public agnostic or a public atheist, in the Army, military, we say this, hey, there's no atheists in foxholes. Some people say, I really don't like that statement. Yes, there is, or, that is really true. So we all know who Elon Musk is, right? Richest guy in the world, Tesla, SpaceX. It's pretty interesting. He says he was caught on video one time right before a rocket was about to go up that he was sending up in space, and one of the rockets prior to, exploded. We kind of know that. And, he's a public agnostic. And as that rocket was about to blast off, he said something to the effect, if there is a higher power out there in the world, in the universe, if you could help us today, let it be. Somebody once said, I don't believe in God, but I miss him. And I think at an existential sense, everybody feels that. I was talking to somebody recently who's really struggling with alcohol, and they are an agnostic, right? So, and they said something that was so experientially profound. That person said, I think I've come to the place in my mind, my heart, and my body that I realize there's a hole, and I've been trying to fill it with alcohol. And I said, I'm not trying to push Alcoholic Anonymous, AA. I'm not saying that, but there is something here that we believe that is tried, tested, and true, that there is a higher power that can help fill that void. And I talk about St. Augustine in his book, The Confessions. He confesses it all. He tried everything. And his famous words are, my heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee, O God. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the ultimate meaning in life, is it not?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, for sure. So I think going back to what Bobby was saying, like the idea behind it is like maybe when you're teaching for the Army, you don't say God, but you say like something high. God. I mean, I say God. That you do. But other Army instructors that like, hey, we can't push God, but so that's why spiritual. There's something, a higher power. I mean, ultimately, people believe something, right? Yeah. Whether it's they believe that there's nothing, they believe something. So it's just making sure that that when the opportunity presents itself, you push what the truth is, and not push, but you present the truth and let them determine for themselves if that's going to be what they go with.
Yeah. So what is the Army doctrine tells you how to present this?
So I didn't read Army doctrine regulation prior to in the past, but we are protected. This is our First Amendment rights. This is the Constitution of the United States, that we could be able to believe something and say something. To power down and push our beliefs on other people is not right. But FM 7-22 talks about spiritual readiness. It says spirituality is often described as a sense of connection that gives meaning and purpose to a person's life. It is unique to each individual. The spiritual dimension applies to all people, whether religious or non-religious. Real quick, identifying one's purpose, core values, beliefs, identity, and life vision defines the spiritual dimension. These elements, which define the essence of a person, enabled to build inner strength and make meaning of experiences, behave ethically, preserve through challenges, and be resilient when faced with adversity, blah, 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 blah. That's what Pathfinder is. Mm-hmm. I just bring out these categories and provide some processes for people to do, and we'll look at those a little bit later and what those processes are.
I think that's a good point too, because even if somebody gets to a place where there's like, you know what, I want to check out, like I don't want to be alive anymore. Like there's something in your spirit that's telling you, you see what I'm saying? And like, it's lost. It's not there. You know what I mean? You're trying to reconnect, but you're thinking like there's something that I need to do. And which is crazy because, I've talked about it before where it's like, deep down at the core, that is, right? Like, that's the only way I'm going to fix what's wrong. You know, you see it with Judas, right? You see it with Judas when he betrays Jesus. What's he want to do? Hey, I want to return these 30 pieces of silver, right? Because I want to try to fix my wrong, and he can't do it. And then the priest, you know what I mean, in the temple were like, whoa, we can't take this blood money. You know what I mean? Let's go buy something with it, right? So like they go buy this plot of land because they can't associate with what they did, right? So and all you're trying to do is clean it up. And what does Judas end up doing? He ends up hanging himself, killing himself, thinking that this is the ultimate way that I need to die. And it's like, yeah, you know what? Something does need to die. That was Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? That was Jesus Christ. And we know that he is a fulfillment, because that's the whole point of here we are at Easter. He raised from the dead, knowing that, hey, guess what? His death was sufficient enough to cleanse us from our sins.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's awesome.
I think that's the best place to stop right there.
So too. I think so.
Coming into tomorrow.
Right.
Well, for everybody else, it was Sunday, but for us right now, it's tomorrow. So
For sure. Yeah, we're at an hour 5, fellas.
yeah, I mean, we have plenty more to keep going, but I think we'll leave you guys in some suspense and get into it in future episodes.
Yeah, so this is going to be a couple episodes coming. You know, might not be back to back for sure, but we're definitely going to have, you know, Paul back on and talk about more of this stuff. Is there anything before we do close? Anything that you really wanted to try to get out?
I think we hit the high points here.
Okay.
And
So just to summarize it real quick, right? Like, hey, you know what? If you're struggling with this, if you're, you know, whether you're a believer, you know what I mean, or maybe you're listening to this and you're not, and you don't even, you're like, I don't know what I believe. I don't know if I believe in God. You know what I mean? Like, you want to give them just a few things to just kind of summarize what we talked about.
Sure. So when you were giving the example of Judas, so he was well connected with the 12, right? He hung out with Jesus for 3 years, as we understand it, and there was a betrayal for some money. So there was an ethical, moral violation there. His purpose became non-existent, and his belonging group became non-existent as he saw it because of his betrayal. And as a result of that, he went into this mindset of catastrophic meaning loss. And so how important it is to diversify, deepen, develop your purpose of life, diversify, deepen your belonging in life, but keep it informed and filled with your moral compass and your spiritual values. You're going to be strong, and you're going to have a great sense of meaning in life.
So having friends, having meaning and purpose.
God-centered.
And God-centered.
God-centered, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Moral centered. You know what, just to close that off, because even as you were saying that, what did Peter do after, because Peter denied Christ, right? And what did he do after he's waiting? You know, it's like Jesus came back, and what did he do? He went fishing. He went back to what he thought his purpose was going to be. Like, hey, you know what? I might not have this, but he still went back to something. And guess what? He was still with the boys. Because he didn't just go, he's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go fishing. I'm going to go back to, like, I guess I'm like not fit for service, you know, and he's fishing, but who's with him? His boys are with him. Like, hey, dude, we're not going to leave you hanging, right? And they're with him. So I think even that is a bigger picture of, like, you know,
that's a really great illustration.
Who are you going to be? You know what I mean? Are you going to, like, because all those guys, all 12 of those guys blew it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So
You want to bring us out?
Yeah. Because we're going another hour. We'll keep going.
We
So,
keep going.
Paul, pray us out, please.
Gracious God, thank you so much for Ignited Fortitude, this podcast, and to be able to talk about these really important things, to lift you up and to see you exalted, Lord, that you would receive honor and glory in our lives and around the world. Lord, in our military, as we are veterans who love our country and love the people who serve. We ask your blessing on this ministry in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.